Space, the final frontier. This is the Observer's Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. Its mission to explore the solar system, to seek out new observations and data, to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. And now the host of the Observer's Notebook, Tim Robertson.
Hello and welcome to episode 188 of the Observer's Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. I'm Tim Robertson, the host of the Observer's Notebook, and also the coordinator of the training program within the ALPO. Thanks for downloading and listening. The Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers collects and analyzes observations of various solar system bodies and associated phenomena, and publishes detailed reports concerning these bodies in its quarterly publication, the Journal of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. This podcast depends upon donations from our listeners to keep it alive. If you enjoy what you hear in the podcast, you can donate to it via Patreon. You're going to start off by giving as little as $1 a month. If you feel even more generous, for $5, you receive early access to the podcast before it goes public. For a monthly donation of $10, you receive a copy of the Novice Observer's Handbook. And for $35 a month, you receive producer credits on the podcast. You can find out more by going to www.patreon.com/observersnotebook. And if you'd like to join the ALPO, membership begins at only $22 a year. Find out more, just go to the internet at www.alpo-astronomy.org. And you can also find us on Facebook. Just search for ALPO Astronomy. And this podcast also has a Facebook page as well. Just search for Observer's Notebook. And if you enjoy what you hear in the podcast, please subscribe. That way you'll never miss any episodes. And now we're going to talk to people that actually observed the 2024 April 8th Total Solar Eclipse. Enjoy. All right, we're going to kick off this series of interviews with the executive director of the ALPO, Ken Poshedly. How you doing, Ken?
Very good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, now you attended the Total Solar Eclipse.
Yes.
Okay, and where you live in Georgia, correct?
Yeah, I live in Metro Atlanta, moving down here for work back in 1984 from Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay, so where did you watch the Total Solar Eclipse?
Well, we did go back up to Cleveland for several reasons. We looked at the path of totality, and we looked at places where I or my wife have connections. I have a high school friend in Dallas. We have friends from my wife's hometown who own a house in Little Rock. My wife has a cousin in Louisville. And then I've still got friends and family all over Metro Cleveland, Ohio. But the weather began to look worse and worse as far as cloudiness, rain, and so forth, at least the forecast for every place except Cleveland, which had, I would estimate, to be about a 50% chance of good skies.
Oh, okay. Now, how long was totality in Cleveland?
Oh, I forgot the exact number, but I know it was, let's say, 3.5 minutes.
Okay.
Like
all right.
That.
All right. So did the weather clear up for you?
Beautifully.
Yeah.
Beautifully. Best location in the nation to me.
Cleveland. All right.
I had, we saw that it was getting worse and worse forecast wise for Dallas, for Arkansas, for Louisville, and for Cleveland. It was iffy, not bad, but just high clouds or something. And so we gambled on it and did the drive.
Now, was this your first total solar eclipse?
This was my second total eclipse. The first one being the 2017 eclipse in August of that year. My wife and I drove I think it was about 2 hours north of Atlanta to Murphy in the boot of North Carolina, the Western boot. And a friend of ours from the church we go to told us, he wasn't sure. He says, hey, in April, he says, hey, I hear there's some kind of an eclipse coming up or something in August. I said, oh, yeah, this is big. This is real big. And he said, oh, okay, well, we've got a cabin up there if you guys want to come on up. That would be fine. So I thanked him, and the next time I saw him, he was all over the place. He found out how big of a deal it was.
Mm-hmm.
It was at a resort lake, and we use the word cabin very loosely. There are lodges all over the mountains and all that stuff up there. So we did the drive, and the skies were just beautiful that day too for North Carolina.
Now, how did this past total solar eclipse compare to the previous one?
To me, this was better because it was longer. I don't remember the duration of totality for the first one. It was not as long as this one, but it was, to me, very dramatic, being my first actual total. We had my RV6, my Criterion RV6, 6-inch Newtonian at the time, equipped with my homemade aluminized Mylar solar filter, which I still have and use it for this one. Now I have a Celestron 8-inch Newtonian, AVX Newtonian on the AVX mount. But this one was more dramatic for me in that I took note more seriously of my surroundings this time.
Did it affect you in any way?
It was like, wow.
Yeah.
Like that, because the first one, the one up in Murphy, was like, oh, wow. But this one was major wow. Now, going back to your first question about how many eclipses I've seen, of course, we've all seen our share of partials.
Right.
But the closest one to a total before the Murphy one was back in '94, when, again, I drove up to Cleveland for the annular eclipse. I think it was in May of that year. And took the RV6 and drove up and made arrangements to meet up with some friends west of Cleveland, near Toledo, near a little town called Wauseon, which turns out to be the point in the entire path of annularity that was the longest point of annularity. And that was very interesting. And for all the people who say, well, you know, I saw the partial, it was 98%. That was sort of like the annular. You could barely tell.
Yeah. Was there anything that surprised you or when you saw this eclipse?
I had heard stories of how the birds and nature and lights, lighting, street lights and that, would this, that, and the other. And I thought, well, we'll see. Well, as it turns out, we lodged with a cousin of mine in Olmsted Township, which is a northwest suburb, a western suburb of Cleveland. It's what I'd call semi-rural. It's built up, but it's not out in the country, but pretty much out there. And we just set up right outside right across the little street from where he lives. And as the eclipse moved forward and forward, you really couldn't tell by looking around until you got, I would say from memory now, until you got to about the last 2 minutes before actual totality. You could tell something was going on. And then it was really in the last 30 seconds that it got noticeably darker, really noticeable. And then finally in the last 10 seconds is when figuratively everything went kaboom, sort of like looking at your backdrop behind you, which I know we can't see. But that's when the street lights went on.
Yeah.
That's when the birds quieted down. I didn't really pay attention to the insects as much, but that was noticeable to me, that it got very, not midnight dark, but very, very dusky dark.
Right.
And that was the dramatic thing. Plus, I took the filter off the end of the scope. We all had some really good looks at the totality. And that was so dramatic because I paid so much attention to what was going on around me, as to also what was going up in the sky.
Yeah, you were more aware, hadn't been through it before. I completely agree with that. Now, did you do any photography?
No, I had been told over and over, live for the moment.
Yep.
Observe. And I've done some astrophotography in the past with what was called the Meade LPI, one of the first webcams that was out there, along with the Philips 2 UCam.
Mm-hmm.
And I now have a ZWO, but I still have to get going with it. But in answer to your question, no, this was just an observing event for me.
Okay. Well, that's a good way to do it, though. Less stress.
Yeah.
All right. Has this interested you?
My cousins got a kick out of it because, they've read all about it. And I tell people now, it's one thing to see it in pictures in a book, but this was the real shebang.
Yeah, that's very good. Now, has this interested you to chase other eclipses? They're going to be further away?
I will be, I don't want to say the number of years, but I might possibly be around in 20 years when the next one, as far as I remember seeing the path, I think it's going to be going through southern, not near the state line, but north of the state line, central and southern Georgia itself. If I still live in this state or whatever, it's a lot more doable.
Yeah. So you don't plan on going to Iceland in 2 years to see the eclipse? Okay. All right.
I would. I think it's a beautiful country, but I'm paying attention to the geologic situations that are going on out there. They're having some real situations with volcanic eruptions. I know that Iceland sits atop the mid-Atlantic ridge, and it's getting very, very active. So who knows what's going to be like in the next 2 years or so.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add about your observations during the eclipse?
If anybody else is thinking of possibly going to see one and they can afford it, do it. Do it. You won't be sorry, even if it's the only one you ever see. If you get a chance to pick a good spot that has a good weather forecast, whether it's a minute and a half or 5 minutes of totality, you won't be sorry. It's just as dramatic as it's described.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot, Ken.
Glad to help.
All right. Next up on our interview process, who am I speaking to?
This is Keith Drake.
Hey, Keith, how you doing?
Doing all right.
Now, you attended the Total Solar Eclipse this past April, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Was it your first?
It was my first, and it probably won't be my last.
Oh, very cool. So where did you go for the eclipse?
Fredericksburg, Texas.
Okay, and where are you from?
Place to see it.
And where are you from?
From Murrieta, California.
Okay, so you had a little bit of a commute.
Just a little bit of a commute. Yeah, not too bad.
Okay. So how far did you travel, would you say?
I think it was around 1,400 miles.
Okay, and you're in Fredericksburg, Texas. And you're in Fredericksburg, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What was the weather like?
Well, it rained a little bit. It was cloudy, but Mother Nature was kind enough to break up the clouds a little bit here and there, so we could actually see the eclipse.
Okay. What motivated you, or who motivated you to go to this eclipse?
Well, I think, sir, you might have had something to do with that.
Yeah, I've known Keith for quite a few years, so it's.
Yes, you have.
and we were in a caravan of RVs traveling from California to Texas for this.
Right.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Good. So what were your expectations going into the eclipse?
Well, my expectations were really that I think I'd mentioned it to you that, okay, we're going to go there and we're going to see it get dark and then it's going to get light again. And we're traveling 1,400 miles to do this. And but then after getting there and actually experiencing it, that was definitely a lifetime experience.
So what are your takeaways for experience?
It was just there's no real way to explain it. I think you got some good shots where as the moon actually completely eclipsed the sun, you got some great shots of solar flares and something like that. I never expected to see anything like that. Honestly, I never expected to see anything like what happened. It was like somebody took a dimmer switch on the day and just turned the lights down. And it was pretty interesting.
That's good. So what were you surprised of something you saw or witnessed?
I was surprised. I was surprised by the solar flares. I was just surprised by the entire experience. You can see it on TV, you can hear about it, but unless you really see it, wow, that is pretty cool.
Yeah. So did it change your life?
Yeah, I'm waiting for that part, but maybe, I mean, it's changed my attitude. How's that?
Yeah. Okay. That's good.
And
So
you've
is
known
it?
me long enough to know that my attitude is a little bit harder to change sometimes in my life.
Oh, trust me, I know. Yeah. Has it interested you to chase eclipses to other parts of the world?
I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking
Yeah.
about, we mentioned something about maybe, was it 2 years?
Yeah. In 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years. We're thinking about it,
Okay.
catch a ship and go hang out and see it again.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. So, do you have anything else to add about your experiences with the eclipse?
If you have any ability to actually go and see it firsthand, don't not like here in California where there was only I think 40% or something like that, but see it in totality and especially enjoy it with some friends.
Hmm.
Everybody got together. We had a cool experience. I mean, all of us were just sitting around talking and looking at that, and it was amazing.
Yeah. It was like you mentioned, it was cloudy where we were at, but the clouds parted at just the
Yeah, no
right
kidding.
time.
They did, didn't they? They just kind of every so often they just open up and you get to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think we saw the sun after the eclipse until hours later.
No, actually, if you remember the next day it rained
Hmm.
on us, and actually rained pretty hard. But
Yeah.
hey, it waited until after the eclipse.
It did. Very good. All right, Keith. Well, if you got anything else, or
No, I think that's it, Tim.
all right. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast.
All right, brother.
Okay, next up on our conversations, I have John Oneal. John is a member of the ALPO, and he also did the podcast with me pre Total Solar Eclipse a few months back. So, welcome, John, and thanks for doing this for me.
Oh, you're very welcome, Tim. I'm glad to be with you. Always enjoy chatting with you.
Yeah. Now we were both in Fredericksburg, but we didn't see each other while we were there. So, where was your location as opposed to mine?
I was downtown Fredericksburg. I was on Main Street,
Oh,
just maybe a half a mile from the downtown shopping strip.
okay. That's a cute little town, isn't it?
It's a wonderful town. The day after the eclipse, we walked up and down the streets and we bought dozens of T-shirts and all kind of souvenirs. And
Yeah.
the town really got with the eclipse theme, and it was like a big party on Main Street downtown.
Yeah. So you came from North Carolina
Mm-hmm.
to Texas. Okay. All right. How far was that, would you say?
Almost 800 miles.
Okay. Now,
And we met Pam and Randy Shivak there.
right.
They came from Florida. We rented a Verbo there 2 years ago because we knew what was going to happen with the prices. Right. So that made it nice. We had an affordable 4-day stay there.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Now, this was your second total solar eclipse?
Yes, was my fifth solar eclipse, but the second total.
Okay. So how did this meet or exceed your expectations after seeing one already?
It met my expectations primarily because I had a lot of equipment failures.
Oh.
And finally, seconds into totality, I just dropped the cameras and tilted my head back and watched.
There you go. Take it in.
And that was tremendous. With the thick clouds we had, I couldn't get my cameras to focus. I couldn't adjust the light levels to get good images. Finally, I just said, you know what, I'm just going to watch it. And that was the 2017 eclipse. I didn't stop that long. It was only 2 minutes long,
right.
First off. So I only stopped for a few seconds to look. But this time, with the equipment problems I had, I just stopped and just stood there in awe and watched it happen. And oh my gosh, it was incredible, Tim. We were downtown. So there were lots of people around, and they were shooting off fireworks, and they were yelling, and screaming, and blowing their car horns, and the fireworks were pretty nice. Fortunately, none of them went in front of the sun for those that were imaging, but it was incredible. It did get really dark, and I think a lot of that I can attribute to how thick the clouds were.
Yeah. Yeah. I was amazed at how quickly it went from like dusk to dark.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
It was like, I would say within 20 seconds. It was just like, it was, you could see the person next to you 1 minute, and then the next minute you couldn't.
Yeah.
It was amazing. Yeah. Were you surprised by anything you saw besides fireworks?
Now that the fireworks surprised me, but other than that, no, not really.
Okay.
How about you?
Like I said, how quickly it got dark. This is my third total, but my first one was way back in 1979. I barely remember that.
Oh, okay. It did. The temperature dropped dramatically.
Yes, it did. But I had noticed that on 2017 too. But this was, and I went with friends who, one of them is on this podcast, who had never seen a total eclipse before. And, I tried not to build it up going into it, but I told them it's going to change their life. So that's basically how I
explained it.
And they both said, you're right. It's been something I've never thought I'd see before. And now they're making plans to see another one.
Wow.
Well, what about you? Are you going to go somewhere in 26?
I don't know about 26. That's the one up in Iceland and down to Spain.
That's it.
Yeah. I'm not sure about that one. I might wait a little longer. But who knows? Plans change every day,
That's true. So you were unable to take any photographs?
I got a few, but
okay.
I didn't get what I anticipated getting. I had huge plans, and everything just conspired to make my plans not work this time.
So you were forced just to sit back and relax and enjoy the event.
Yes, and I'm kind of glad that happened, because otherwise I wouldn't have done it. With the clouds zooming by, it just really made it all the more of a transient event. Transient event. It wasn't like a repeat of the 2017 eclipse.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, it was totally different.
Yeah, to me, the clouds really added to the view.
Yes.
Because it was very easy to see with the naked eye. Even a minute or two before totality, you'd have the clouds in front and they would peek behind, and you could still see a little bit of it. So it was.
Yeah, and that huge prom on the bottom right. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and that was naked eye. You could see, that was, which I've never seen a prominence naked eye before. So that was a whole different experience.
Yes.
Cool.
Another friend, I don't know. Do you know Sergio Figueroa?
I know the name.
Okay, he's from the Winter Star Party. That's
okay. All right.
Okay. He was a little bit away from Fredericksburg, where we were. And he says, hey, I'm going to be here. I don't have plans or anything. Can I join you guys? So he came over and joined me and Dorothy and Pam and Randy. And a couple hours before the eclipse started, he said, I don't think the chances look good here. I'm going north. And he went north, and by golly, he got some nice pictures. So
good. You never know.
Yeah. I mean, a little bit of distance, a few miles, made all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I think all amateur astronomers that went to Fredericksburg decided 3 years ago, that's where they're going to be, because we all looked at the NOAA charts and the weather forecasts and how it is in April, and it was due to be the best spot. So but
and if that front had held off another hour, we'd have all been happy as could be.
Yep. Or if an eclipse would have happened 2 hours earlier, it would.
Yes.
It was nicer in the morning too. And the next day it rained.
Right.
So it was crazy.
Yeah, I was packing the car in the rain.
No fun. Well, you got anything else to add about your experiences with this eclipse?
Oh, well, not really. I would have to agree with you wholeheartedly that the clouds did make a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
And
in a positive way, I think.
Yes, in a positive way. It sort of blew me out of the water because I couldn't get focused. But other than that, it was pretty incredible.
Good. How did Randy do? He get good shots?
When the clouds weren't there, yes,
Okay.
he did.
Okay. I don't believe I've seen any of his yet. I haven't looked.
Yeah, I don't think he's posted any yet. At least I haven't seen him yet.
Okay. Well, John,
we'll have to get after him, right?
Yeah, we will. I want to thank you for coming on to do this. And also, I guess you're going to be writing the post-eclipse report for the ALPO for the journal.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
Has anyone posted anything yet?
Let's see. Matt Will sent out an email blast to everybody to send their observations to the eclipse at alpoastronomy.org.
Great.
So, and you'll get access to that. So
great.
And also all that information is going to be in the show notes for this podcast too. So just look down below and you'll see the address. Anybody that's got eclipse photographs, please send them in. They'll be included in the report.
All right. And I'll post this on Solar Activity too and let everyone there know.
Great.
And hopefully some of them guys will pictures. I've seen some incredible ones on there.
Yeah. Sounds good. All right, John. It's good talking to you.
All right. Good talking with you, Tim, and we'll do it again sometime.
All right. Sounds good, man.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. Next up, we have Daniel Herron. Welcome to the podcast, Dan.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. Now, where do you live?
I live in Canton, Georgia, which is about 25 miles north of the Atlanta airport.
Okay, so you had to travel for the eclipse.
Oh, yeah.
Where did you go to?
Well, the original plan was to go to Caryville, Texas. I had a friend who had family there, so we had a place all set up. Mm-hmm. And then Wednesday before the eclipse, we started seeing that the weather was looking kind of iffy. Mm-hmm. And so we switched gears and decided to go to upstate New York. I think Plattsburgh is where we were heading. I was lucky enough to be able to find a hotel in Albany. Wow. So we planned on heading up there on Friday before the eclipse. So we headed north.
Okay. Yeah, I was in Fredericksburg, and there was a group, friends of ours, that were down in Caryville, and they got clouded out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my brother actually went to Caryville because he was going to meet us there for the eclipse, but he was spending the whole week out there doing a spring break with his family.
Oh, nice.
So he decided to still go and do that. They were able to see it through clouds, right when he's got a video on YouTube. Right when the totality started, they got a kind of a little sucker hole of blue sky. And then the eclipse started, and then about 5 seconds later, it kind of started going into the clouds. But they were able to see it in and out of the clouds from Caryville.
Oh, good. So how far did you travel?
We traveled probably, I think I estimated about 1,800 miles total. We ended up going to Maine. So we drove up on Friday. We started, and we stayed right outside of Washington, D.C. the first night. And then we woke up the next morning. So this is Saturday morning. We woke up and we were looking at the weather, and even Plattsburgh and eastern upstate New York was starting to look a little iffy and kind of concerned us. So I canceled the Albany hotel, got another hotel in Oxford, Maine, which was about 2 hours away from where we eventually ended up seeing the eclipse, which was in Jackman, Maine, which is about 10, 15 miles from the Canadian border.
Wow.
So overall, I think it was about maybe 1,600 miles one way to get up there.
And your weather was good up there?
It was beautiful. That morning we kind of had they had just had a nor'easter come through a few days before. So there was snow on the ground. And they cleaned the roads pretty good though, but the ground was kind of soggy. So it kind of limited where we were able to set up for the eclipse since we were photographing the eclipse. So yeah, we were able to luckily contact. As soon as we figured out we were going to Jackman, I called up. I started looking at places and looked on their website and went to the Chamber of Commerce for the city and tried to see if they had any events planned. Of course, which they did.
Mm-hmm.
And was looking at places to set up. And I called the hardware store there, Jackman Hardware, and said, "Hey, we're driving up from Atlanta, Georgia to see the eclipse. Do you think we can set up in your parking lot?" It was a nice kind of open parking lot. And they said, "Yeah, sure. Come on up." So we set up outside of Jackman Hardware. So big kudos to those. If you're ever in Jackman, that's where you need to get your hardware stuff from.
Did you have a crowd there?
It was. They had an event. We were probably about a mile north of the downtown area, if you can call it that, in Jackman, Maine. It's just like where the city hall building is. And they had a field set up for observing for the general public. We set up at Jackman, which was a little bit Jackman Hardware, which was a little bit further north, just to kind of get out of the crowd a little bit. But it's still, by the time the eclipse rolled around, the parking lot was full, and people were kind of starting to crowd around and get excited, which was fine. Mm-hmm. But since we were photographing the eclipse, we kind of we didn't want to have a huge mass of people around us because there's just all chances for things to go wrong. But we still shared views with our solar binoculars that we had, and we were showing a couple of interesting people. We even helped a kid build a quick solar filter for his telescope so he could look at it through his telescope. So kind of a little bit of public outreach and helping people. I mean, we did the entire eclipse, so we got there probably about 7 or 8 in the morning because we had no idea how crowded it was going to be, and we needed a good place. The eclipse there didn't start until after 2:18, I think, was when the eclipse started. So we got there, talked to the hardware store, got set up, and just kind of waited. And so we were photographing it all the way through the partial phases. So yeah, we had a little bit of time to kill here and there. So we were, talking with people, and of course they see your telescope set up and they come over and want to talk and see what you can see through your telescope. And we're like, well, we have cameras on it. You can't look through it, but here's a screen of the camera. Oh. And so yeah, we had a pretty good setup, and it was nice. The weather was really nice. It was a little cloudy in the morning, just some thin high clouds, but they blew through, and it was clear. And one of the cool things about seeing the eclipse from up there, since the ground was covered in snow, was that we were able to see the shadow bands.
Oh, nice white surface.
Yeah, right as totality was starting, we got to see kind of the little shadow bands kind of going across the surface, which none of that came up on any of our videos. Came out on the videos because of the exposure just wasn't quite set right. But it was cool to see them, and they were extremely obvious. I was looking for them in the 2017 eclipse. We went to Wyoming for that one. Okay. And we were in like a pasture, and so it was really hard. It was grassy and sandy, so it was really hard to see them. But on the snow, it really helped.
Yeah. So you sound like you really chased down this eclipse.
We did.
The best possible spot. That's good.
And it's interesting that the traditional historical weather was the exact opposite of the way it turned out. I mean, it was like, it's like 60 or 70% chance of clear skies in Texas during that time of the year, and like 0% that Northeast is going to be clear.
I booked my campsite in Fredericksburg 2.5 years ago. I had picked this is the place to be, and I went and I saw it, but we didn't have perfectly clear skies, but I was very happy with it. Yeah. So how many eclipses have you seen?
This was my second total eclipse. Okay. Of course, I've seen a couple of partials here and there as when I was younger. I did travel to Albuquerque in October last year. I believe it was October, to see the annular eclipse.
Yeah, I was there during the balloon festival. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was there as well.
Yeah, we set up basically right outside the hotel room that we got.
Oh, nice.
And actually met Jim Cantori on the flight home. Of course, the Weather Channel is based in Atlanta, so he was on the flight. And so we were actually sitting by waiting for our bags at the Atlanta airport together, and I was showing him some of my photos, and we were talking about how we arrived and we saw him reporting on the eclipse, and we're like, oh, great, it's going to start storming or raining because Cantori's here. But it turned out really good, and that was really cool to see the annular eclipse. And it wasn't quite as busy it wasn't as big of a deal, I don't think, to the general public to see the annular eclipse than to see total. So, yeah, 1 annular eclipse and 2 total solar eclipses. So.
Okay, so how did this one compare to the previous 2017?
Yeah, there are some differences. I mean, the 2017 one being the first was just really cool, but it was also really short compared to this one. And it was kind of like I photographed both eclipses, but I had that all automated.
Okay.
So I wasn't going to be looking down at my camera while an eclipse happening, trying to figure out what was going on or change settings. So I used a program called Eclipse Orchestrator to control my cameras, exposures and settings and everything to take pictures. And I did that for both eclipses. Okay. But the first eclipse, I was looking at the horizon because we were up on kind of a hill on a plateau at a ranch in Wyoming, and you could see all around you. And a couple miles down the road was they had been pulling in buses, like Greyhound buses, all day. And so seeing the eclipse approach, I was looking at the horizon and I was looking at the shadow approaching, and I missed seeing the diamond ring and stuff. The very beginning of the diamond ring and the Bailey beads visually at the beginning of the eclipse, because I was looking at the surroundings. So this time I was sure to be looking up the whole time, and as soon as I could take off my solar glasses, I was looking up and able to see it. I think because we're at solar maximum, I think the corona was a little bit brighter and a little bit more activity this time than last time. Last time it seemed like there were large gaps in the corona that you could see, and this time it was just kind of like it was everywhere. A lot more prominences.
Yes.
And this one, in the 2017 one, though, we had a couple of bigger sunspots than this one. But, we did have some really nice prominences. And the main difference I noticed that during the eclipse is because the moon was bigger in our sky than it normally is, which is why we had a longer eclipse than we did in 2017, was that you actually could see the moon kind of at the beginning covering up that one large prominence that was kind of, in my view, in my images, it's at the bottom of the picture. But that prominence just seemed to grow and get bigger because the moon was actually moving past it. And so it was kind of cool to actually be able to see that and to get the longer eclipse, basically.
Great. So what surprised you with this one?
I think just the shadow bands, mainly because of the location was a kind of a surprise. I've even forgotten even to look for them until I saw them. So it's kind of funny. In 2017, I was looking for them and didn't see them. And this one, I completely forgot about them because I was focused on seeing the eclipse start. And then I saw them because of the snow. So that obviously surprised me. The number of prominences and how bright they were, and the crowd who was kind of a different level of experience viewing eclipses around us even pointed them out and said, what is that little fiery part sticking out of it? And so we said, that's a solar prominence. With the naked eye, So, being able to see it, they all called them solar flares. And we were like, no, well, they're prominences, and that kind of spiked some interest. People were like, oh, well, what are prominences? How did that work? And we're like, it's material coming off the sun, following magnetic lines. And they're like, oh, that's kind of cool to see. I'm like, yeah, usually you need like a solar scope to see those. So seeing those naked eye was really cool.
It was really
the Bailey beads were definitely different on both sides of the eclipse. This time, they seem to be, at least visually with my naked eye, I could actually see some of them kind of forming and fading away. So that was really cool to see the different. I mean, if anyone ever told me I've seen one total solar eclipse, I don't need to see another one. I'm like, they're all different. You don't know what the moon's doing, the sun's doing. The different parts of the craters and mountain ranges on the edges of the moon are going to do with those Bailey beads and diamond rings. And you don't know what the corona is going to look like. I mean, they do predict these things, and you can look them up and kind of get an idea of what it's going to look like. But every eclipse is different.
Right.
I'm already trying to talk my wife into going to Greenland in 2026.
Oh, there you go. We're gonna do Iceland, I think.
Yeah,
Iceland's a little easier to get to.
Yeah, but have you looked at the map?
Oh yeah,
it's crossing like a little tiny point.
Well, I plan on being on a cruise ship.
That's a little different. That's
right
a little
in
different.
The path, yeah.
That's Iceland adjacent.
Yes,
but
it is.
If you actually want to be on the land, you're going to be there with a whole bunch of people, and it's not even near the center line. So
that's true.
Yeah, but I have some people that I work with that live in Spain and Portugal, so I could also go maybe pay them a visit.
Oh, there you go. It's worth it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, you have anything else you'd like to add?
Oh, and I think Australia in a couple of years as well is going to have a couple of them. So, yeah, I mean, I see why people travel for them. The cruise ship idea is interesting. I mean, it's an option because I don't think that I'm going to be so involved in trying to photograph them anymore and just more enjoy them, especially if I have to travel and I can't take my equipment with me. But yeah, just to close, I would tell people if you ever have a chance to see a total eclipse, it's definitely worth whatever effort you can make to see it.
That's true.
Yeah. So absolutely.
All right. Well, Dan, thanks for doing this for me.
You're welcome. Thanks.
All right. All right. Next up on our list, we have a friend of mine, Lisa Tate-Holmes. How you doing, Lisa?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Tim?
I'm doing good. Doing very good. Now, you and your husband, Calvin, joined us on our adventure toward Texas for the eclipse. Yeah. How did you find that?
First, I just want to thank you so much for putting that trip together. I've never witnessed a eclipse, and it's 100% totality. So just having you do that and having all the equipment that you had, your telescopes and your cameras, it was just fascinating. And you're absolutely right. Never witnessed anything like that, and it did change my life.
Oh, fantastic. Good. Well, I'm glad you really enjoyed it, and I think eclipses should be shared with friends. Much like a good glass of wine.
I agree.
So what were your expectations going into the eclipse?
You know what? I didn't have any because, like I mentioned, I didn't ever witness something like this. So I was just excited to be there and just wanting to take it all in.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What were you surprised by during the event?
Just as the whole thing led up, to be able to see the moon cover the sun's entire disk. And it was crazy because it looked as though the moon was the exact size of the sun. And it allowed this beautiful sun's corona that it was just, I can't even really put it in words. And as it got darker and I saw the birds flying to their designated trees and chirping, and then all the lights in the park we were staying at, the solar lights coming on. Mm-hmm. And, just to learn that there were only certain states that were in the path to be able to witness this. And then to see this where we were, and to also, we were a little skeptical because we didn't know if the clouds were going to cooperate, and they did. Just like at that very moment, they allowed us to see this. It was just amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty magical how the clouds parted just at the right time.
It was like a blessing from the man above, for sure.
There you go. Now, has it motivated you to see other type of astronomical events, maybe other eclipses?
Oh, yeah. And I know, according to what you said, Iceland is next year.
26.
And 26. And then the next one in the States is 2044.
2044.
Wow. Yes, I would love to see another one.
Okay. Good. Well, hopefully we can make it work.
I think you can. I have faith in you.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah. So do you have anything else you'd like to add about your experiences during the eclipse, or what your thoughts are afterward?
I feel like this is something, if somebody hasn't had the opportunity to see, definitely make this a to-do. It's something that everybody should be able to do once in their lifetime. So I would like to see it again, and hopefully introduce it to people that I know that have not been able to see one.
That's very good. All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on today and sharing your thoughts.
Thank you, Tim. You guys have a good day. Give Bev a hug for me.
All right, I will. All right. Next up on our eclipse experiences is Scott Harris. Welcome to the podcast, Scott.
Great to be here, Tim. Thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, sure. Before we get started, where are you located from?
So I am a planetary geologist located just outside of Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay. All right. And where did you go to observe the eclipse?
Well, my daughter and I took a 6-day trek out across country, headed for Del Rio, and we were in Del Rio about 2 hours before totality. The weather was looking a little bad, and we actually ended up in Rock Springs, Texas.
Oh, okay. So how far did you travel to see it?
I recorded the whole trip, which was a thing in itself. We ended up round trip. We ended up driving 3,800 miles.
Oh my, oh my. Cool. And how was the weather when you got there?
Well, the weather when we got to Texas was great. If we'd had the eclipse on the day we got to Del Rio, you couldn't have asked for better. But we had when we got there, there was a little bit of a stationary front had developed, being driven along. A little bit of a cold front coming in from the west. I think that's what the entire nation was experiencing. And the question was, when was that going to push through? And it was started to look really good the day before. And then I went out on the morning of the eclipse, and while the clouds associated with the front had moved off to our east toward the Gulf, that was allowing some low-level clouds to actually start coming back off the Gulf back to the west. So it started to look pretty. What was looking hopeful against all odds at that point was starting to look pretty dismal. And so we along, I'm sure everybody around us were looking at all the radar data we could, all the satellite imagery we could, and trying to make guesses about what the right thing to do was. And it was about, like I said, about 2 hours ahead of totality. We decided that it just wasn't going to work out there. We found looking at satellite imagery along with some IR data, saw a hole up to our north that seemed to be an area where, when those clouds that were coming off the Gulf, when that moisture was getting into that area, they were dissipating. And we took a gamble that was going to stay that way.
Okay. So did the eclipse meet your expectations going in?
Well, this was my first totality.
Oh, it was.
It was. And I think you might be aware of this, that when we had the one in 2017, I was in charge of the planetarium and observatory at Fernbank Science Center in Atlanta, and was in charge of public programming for that day. And we only had 97% here. And I joked that I was probably the one person in the state of Georgia who was told, you can't go to totality because you have to be here manning the battle stations. And it was a great experience then, entertaining what ended up being almost 7,000 people live and untold, in other ways that we were reaching out. And leading up to that, I was going out and doing talks and everything from schools to civic clubs to businesses were having me come out to parties in the 2 weeks leading up to it in 2017. And so I said, no matter what I was doing where I was for this one, I was going, and I was adamant that everybody was talking about going to the Midwest, all these places. I was like, it's a longer drive to Texas, but I'm going to go to the most arid part and the most western part. I mean, those two things together, I think, were critical. You want it, don't gamble too much on the moisture, but the Gulf is there, so it's a possibility. But then you've also, if you've got fronts coming in, the place that was going to clear first was going to be the western end of it. And so we thought we're going to be good, and Mother Nature almost made me regret my decision, but at the last minute, things turned out better than we could have ever imagined.
That's fantastic. So being your first total solar eclipse, what surprised you?
Well, I'd run simulations of totality so many times in just for running simulations, also for making planetarium productions. And I tell you, some of the digital software that's out there now, some of the systems are really good at replicating a lot of it. And one of my first thoughts, well, maybe my fourth or fifth thought was, wow, this really is kind of like we see in the simulations. But those first 3 or 4 thoughts before that were like, yeah, this is different. This cannot be replicated. This is everybody I'd listen to saying you have to go to totality. It's a different experience. You know, as a scientist and as someone engaged with the public all the time about these things, it was like, okay, I would hear those and I'd be like, okay, I get it, but there was a little grain of, oh, come on. And then when it happened, it was like, yeah, you can't replicate that. And I think one of the things that happened right off the bat, after sort of the relief of, wow, we're going to have a hole open up at this moment. And I think the cooling, when you're right in the totality, the umbra, the cooling from the umbra coming across and cooling the upper atmosphere from the top down. I think, you know, everybody's talked about this in other eclipses I'd heard, even to a little bit when we were not right on the totality path in 2017. We experienced a little bit of that cooling, some last second cloud dissipation. Not quite as dramatic as this, but this really, you got the sense that, wow, in that moment where that umbra comes across, it starts cooling, certain types of clouds just are not stable. And they go away very rapidly. Of course, it's amazing, as you're in totality and you start creeping out, they come back just as quickly. So a lot of our images on the downstream side of the peak, you start having those same clouds, you know, get more prevalent. But that gave some excellent opportunities for some unique photography. And I think that the other thing that was really striking was the color of the sky. I think maybe even some of the clouds around gave a unique diffusive effect that really made those colors pop. And then as a planetary geologist, you know, I'm interested in that big rock up there that's in the way of the light at that point. And you're looking there at the, you know, I've seen the photos. I had seen, you know, what were composite photos because of the differences in exposure, so you get to see the lunar near side. But I never had quite appreciated until I saw it exactly how much earthshine there is and what that looks like, and also the color of it being very blue, really indicating that, you know, that our ocean's effect of getting that light back up there to the moon and reflecting back.
That's a really good point, because I know in some of my images I can make out some details on the near side of the moon during totality, and I never thought I'd be able to do that.
Oh, I've even got one over contrasted image, you know, after I photoshopped it a little bit, of one where I just basically saturated the corona, and so the moon just is totally, you know, like a black hole. And I suddenly realized, I was actually looking at this a short while ago, and I noticed that I actually could make out some of the topography on the lunar limb.
Wow, that's interesting. So you took photographs of it. You do videos. What type of equipment did you use?
So I had so my daughter and I we had 2 different you know, digital cameras that we had aimed at it without any scope. I've got one that with a telephoto that basically acts like goes out to 220 millimeters and acts like a pretty decent scope. I do a lot of just wide field astrophotography with it on a routine basis. But I also had an ALPO scope that was trained on it.
Okay.
And the images from that are pretty interesting, because you see, I was getting a good image in that of the partial leading up. You know, we're at 95%, 90, 96, 97, and you actually see the smudging of the light from the clouds. And it's the last one where you could actually go in, I guess, you know, figure out exactly what percentage it was, but just, it must have been 99.95 and it's not smudged, right? At that moment, that's where everything, those clouds went away. And then I did get one shot right as it was going into, right at the moment of totality, where I started getting a number of the prominences, immediately showing up around the edges. And then I actually switched. As soon as that happened, I then looked up, took a moment just to appreciate it. I have a video that on my cell phone. I was trying to get the video with my cell phone up till the moment of totality, and then I had to put my phone down because I had the scope, and I was controlling with one hand, camera in the other hand, and I actually put the phone down, and all you get is audio for a bit. And I've listened to that. I almost was unconscious that I'd done that, and so I've listened back to it, and it's like I'm literally the kid in the candy store. And the number of times I just sort of said, "Wow," got to be excessive. But we were looking at, and so we got, we weren't trying to get super technical photos. We're just, trying to get really where our first time here, appreciating it. And we had about about 3 minutes, 15 seconds or something of totality. So we had plenty of time to take photos, soak it in, kind of look around at the crowd, see what was happening there. And that group in Rock Springs was really fascinating to talk to, because you had a lot of people who, only became fascinated by eclipses back last fall for the annular. Okay. They were sort of ground zero for the annular. That kind of got their attention. It's like, hey, we can experience the annular, then turn around and experience this. And so, for a small town there, they were throwing quite a little party out on their square. And it turned out to just be, we would not have gotten the experience that we got there on the town square in Rock Springs if we had still been in Del Rio. There you go. That's probably a good point. Yeah. Wow. So are you ready to chase the next one? If I had a infinite bank account, sure. I have I still have a colleague who has, he was kind of, poo-pooing them a little bit, like in a way, like I was talking about. It's like, okay, I'm a scientist, I get it, but I just haven't made that trip to totality yet. And I looked at him like, I got to tell you, you got to go. And he still was being a little hesitant about it. Then I showed him a couple of the pictures, talked to him another few times, and finally he said, "Okay, well, when's the one?" So let's see, when are we getting our tickets up to Nome? So yeah. So I've been to Iceland. I have not. My only state I have not been in is actually Alaska. I hope to get it before we get to the time for the eclipse up there, but. I've also, I was seriously, if I do it, it probably will be one of the ones in Africa. Okay. Yeah, but the thing is, the message I'm hearing from everybody I talk to, a lot of them, it's their first time eclipse. I'm kind of surprised it's your first, and knowing you're at 97%, that must really irk you today. Oh, it was. I'm glad it worked out the way it did, because I got that experience with the crowds. I got to MC an eclipse. Which was terrific, and also I can't regret that. But yeah, it's kind of that feeling. I'm sure a little bit comparable to I was thinking about Jim Lovell, with the. Being sent, he was, basically in that position, going to the moon, being sent up on, for a mission to get there, but deliberately not land. And how many times as a pilot, he must have been like, I'm just going to land. It's like, how many times? And so, at 97%, you're just looking at, it's like, couple hundred more miles. If I could have a transporter or something here, just flash out of here, or everybody somehow blow real hard and and get that last bit of closure. But no, it was worth waiting on. It was worth having that experience with my daughter. I'm sure. What does she think? She's actually, as I'm talking to you, she's within earshot of me, and so I'm kind of, I'm watching what I say. She in the moment was she was, I think, fascinated by it.
Okay.
But I think she loved being she's real artistic and into to art and photography, so she was appreciating that aspect of it. But she has since admitted that, it was great, but it wasn't life altering. You got to appreciate she's also 15, so
okay.
it's a little different perspective, but I think she probably soaked in, and I'm glad for this, probably soaked in a lot more of the people, the environment,
right?
Those sorts of things, which, that'll be good for her to remember. And when I need reminding of it, I can ask her where I was concentrating on those fine details of the lunar basins.
Mm-hmm. Hey, the scientist in you was coming out. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, very good, Scott. I want to thank you for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure.
All right. We'll talk to you later. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Observer's Notebook podcast. Again, I want to thank the guests of today's podcast, Ken Poshedly, John Oneal, Keith Drake, Daniel Herron, Lisa Tate-Holmes, and Scott Harris for sharing their experience during the 2024 Total Solar Eclipse. And if you have any observations or reports you'd like to submit to the ALPO for publication, you can send them to eclipse@alpo-astronomy.org. We upload a new episode of the Observer's Notebook every few weeks. You can subscribe to us on iTunes. If you do, give us a rating. I'd really appreciate it. You can also listen to us on Apple Radio, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Google Play, Stitcher, Amazon Echo, Spotify, and this podcast also has a YouTube channel as well. And if you're listening to it over there, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe. You can help support the podcast by donating to it via Patreon by giving up to $35 a month, where you'll receive 1 year's membership to the ALPO and producer credits on the podcast. And with that, I'd like the producer of this podcast, Steve Siedentop, and Michael Moyer for their generous support. The link for Patreon, as well as the link for the ALPO, is in the show notes. You can contact me via email at commentman@commentman.net or on Twitter at ObserversNBpod. And until next time, my hope is you always have clear and steady skies. Thanks for listening.